So I'd like to welcome everybody to this Pentaculum Roundtable event that we're having. It's really great to bring together three of our Pentaculum coordinators who work with woodworkers and sculptors to have a conversation about this really unique event that ARROWMONT's able to offer. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Nick DeFord. I'm the program director at ARROWMONT. And it was actually one of the people, along with my colleague, Jason Burnett, who sort of let this event evolve out of an event that Jason was doing at the time. And so I want to start this presentation with just talking about what Pentaculum is, introducing you all to it with a little slideshow that I have prepared. And then after that, I'll introduce our panelists today, and we'll have a conversation about what it means to come to ARROWMONT for Pentaculum. So what is Pentaculum? It's a very funny name for something that is actually an event that I think is difficult to describe at first, but one that when people come to, they say it's a very memorable experience. And it began in 2015, actually began a couple of years before that. As I mentioned, my colleague, a ceramicist, Jason Burnett, wanted to have an event that he would bring together people working in the field of ceramics, artists who all shared a love for surface decoration and surface design, to just work in the same studio with each other during a week in the winter, a time of sort of quiet and solitude, to pull people out of the studio when they're usually solitary and work alongside others in a community. That ceramic surface form, which what he called it at the time, was actually so successful it evolved with some of his other colleagues into a more general surface form that invited fiber artists and metals artists as well. It was that time that I was the program and studio manager at ARROWMONT. Jason was coming on board to help at ARROWMONT at the time. And we started having a conversation about taking this event even bigger and continuing it every year. And the 10 studios at ARROWMONT actually divide themselves up pretty well into 5 pairs. And so we had the idea, well, why not call it Pentaculum, a 5-sided object? And this would sort of represent the 5 different studio areas that could be represented at this event. So it became 5 disciplines in one event, but it's actually 6 now. We added writers to the group. And so there's not only wood and sculpture, which we'll talk about today, but also ceramics, metals, fibers, 2D arts like painting and printmaking, and then our 6-sided part of it, which is a group of writers that come. And it's actually the writers that it's really interesting group that comes to ARROWMONT because they're able to share what they do on nightly events throughout the week where they give readings. So here's some images of just some Pentaculum groups in the past. Of course, you'll see Kim over there on the right with the wood group, but the top left is a group of writers and the bottom left is a group of metals artists. And so to describe what Pentaculum actually is, it's our coordinators who invite artists to come work together alongside each other for a week in the winter, and now we have it in the spring. And that's it. There's no formal instruction. There's very little formalized events that happen, typically like the writers' readings in the evening and some other things that we might do. But it's a really organic event that has no necessary, for individuals who come, plan or schedule. It's just a time to be creative. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more when we talk to our panelists and coordinators. But from what I've seen in my experience is that you have some people who come who are wanting to finish one object or a project, or maybe even start something new, or maybe just be around other people. I think these photos, what it shows is that it's really about community and networking while there. So of course, our wood discipline takes place in the ARROWMONT's Wingate Center for Wood, which includes 2 different studios in it and a shop room, which you can see here. You know, ARROWMONT, if you've not been to ARROWMONT before, has a studio that's dedicated to wood turning, but also a second studio in the wood complex that is for furniture making, sculpture, and other sort of things, and a shop room that connects the 2. So the Pentaculum artists can spread out over these spaces. They can have a lot of room to work on big projects or can work together communally with other artists. As I mentioned, we started with a winter event, but Pentaculum is something we keep wanting to grow at ARROWMONT. And so we've added a spring event, of which when I introduce Nick, I'll talk about that a little bit too. And this is one of our coordinators, upcoming coordinators, Brandon Donahue, working in the 2D studio. So now I want to introduce our panelists, and all of our panelists are coordinators for Pentaculum. They have been, and I'll sort of talk about how long they've been a coordinator and such. But so we'll start with Kim. So Kim Winkle is a maker who creates furniture and objects using wood and paint. Her work displays a balance of form, color, and surface pattern. She has exhibited nationally and internationally, including SOFA Chicago, Wanted Design New York City, and the Architectural Design Home Show. Kim has been awarded several artist residencies, including the International Turning Exchange at the Center for Art in Wood in Philadelphia, the Wingate Artist Residency at State University of New York, Purchase, and Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, and the Vermont Studios Center. She was awarded a State of Tennessee Individual Artist Award in 2011 and the Society of Arts and Crafts Boston John D. Minnick Furniture Fellowship in 2014. Kim is a professor and director of the School of Art, Craft, and Design at Tennessee Tech University in Middle Tennessee. And Kim was our very first wood coordinator, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So that was, I think it would have been 2016 or 17, Kim?
17.
17. Okay. Next, we have Nick Flaherty. Nick is a woodworker, furniture maker, wood turner, and contractor living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He graduated from University of Arts, where he received his BFA. He has taught and demonstrated in and around Philadelphia at local schools in the Wharton Esherick Museum. His work has been exhibited and displayed at the American Craft Council Conference, the American Association of Woodturners Symposium, and the Center for Art in Wood. And Nick was our first, and is our first spring wood coordinator. So we started the spring event 2 years ago. Of course, the pandemic sort of disrupted a lot of the timeline, but spring event is just one of the many sort of evolutions that we want to keep doing with Pentaculum and bringing it forward. And finally, Jason Schneider. Jason is an artist and furniture maker from Marquette, Michigan. He received his MFA in furniture design from San Diego State University. Jason's work explores the inherent beauty and character of corrugated cardboard in both functional and sculptural forms. He has exhibited his work extensively throughout the United States, including SOFA Chicago, the Museum of Craft and Design in San Francisco, ICFF in New York, and the Center for Art in Wood in Philadelphia. Jason currently teaches furniture design and woodworking at Northern Michigan University. And Jason was set to become the next wood coordinator for the 2020, what year are we in? 2021 Pentaculum that we would have had at the beginning of this year. We, however, canceled that due to the pandemic. So 2022 is when Jason will take over as coordinator. I didn't really mention that during the introduction, but one of the things that we do with Pentaculum is we have our coordinators rotate in order to keep new groups coming and keep the sort of artists that come sort of nice and fresh. So with that being said, I am now going to open it up to start the conversation. And I think the best way to do that is to go around to each individual panelist and just have them maybe introduce the first time that they came to Pentaculum, because I think even before they were coordinators, they at least knew of the event and had some experience with the event. If maybe the first time they came was a coordinator, they could talk about that. But what was your first experience with Pentaculum and what was it like? And maybe Kim, you can start us off since you were the first one.
Sure. My first experience with Pentaculum was in 2017. I had been to ARROWMONT the summer prior teaching a workshop, and that's when I first became familiar with Pentaculum. And as I understand it, there was sign painting that was happening in the wood studio, and I was talking to Heather, and it's like, oh, we should do woodworking. And I think she had mentioned that was the plan, was to try to get some more 3D arts involved. And so I'm like, well, if, I'd be interested in being a part of that if there's a possibility. And so then that next year, that 2017 winter, I was one of the first groups or first individuals that was part of the wood group. So I didn't actually serve as a coordinator in 2017. And then I had a conversation with Grant Benoit and Jason Burnett at Ober-Gatlinburg on that last night. And I was just like, if y'all need a wood coordinator, I'm your gal. I know people in woodworking and I know people in wood turning, and it would be nice to have a bigger group. So that's how it all started for me. And I think just putting myself out there and letting them know that I would be happy to be a part and serve as a coordinator was really great. And it's been a really wonderful and fun experience. So that's how I first got started in Pentaculum.
Excellent. Nick, how about you go next?
My first experience with the Pentaculum was actually, I think, the second year that Kim was coordinating the wood studio, and she invited me to be just a participant there, not in the coordinator role. So I went down there, and that was actually the first experience like this that I had ever been a part of. I'd only been woodworking for 3 years, maybe 3-4 years. And so it was the first time that I'd gone and done any sort of residency, sort of shared experience, any sort of craft school experience. So it was really eye-opening to me to be a part of that and to be a part of that community, which, you know, as a woodworker can often be lost, you know, because it's difficult to practice our craft around so many other people. You know, to be in the studio can be a very sort of solitary experience. So to be in the, you know, in the darkest days of winter, to go down and be with all of these, you know, 60 or 70 other like-minded craftspeople and makers and creators was just so invigorating. And then, yeah, I guess so that was my first Pentaculum experience.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. And Jason, talk about your experience.
Right. Well, coming into it, I was very confused, not fully understanding what Pentaculum meant. I knew I was going to be working in the studio for a week right after the new year. I was really excited. And when I got to ARROWMONT, it all just made sense. You know, even in the airport on the way there, I was like, what am I going to? What am I doing? But the beauty of it is that Kim put together such a wonderful group of woodworkers and woodturners that, and a lot of them were friends or past, you know, grad school friends, and my old professor from graduate school, as well as Kim. We went to school together. It was like a family reunion in the wood shop with all this wonderful creative energy. And, you know, I think the facilities were wonderful. The dorm was great. I was really impressed. The food was great. And just the energy of everybody participating was really wonderful. And of course, I do like social scenes, so that karaoke night was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, karaoke at Pentaculum is a sight to see. Well, Jason, actually, it's a perfect segue what you talked about into sort of my first question that I'll ask you all, and you all can discuss and talk a little bit about and jump in, which is, you know, at the intro, I even mentioned it's difficult to describe what Pentaculum is. And often when you're trying to describe it to other people, it's difficult to find the right words, and people often don't understand what this event is. And I think the reason why is because there's not a lot of places like events like this out there. And the best way that we can describe it is to describe it with like terms. So it's kind of like a short-term residency. It's kind of like a workshop. It's kind of like a symposium, but it's also like none of those things. So you all, of course, do a lot of those other things. You have done residencies before. You have gone to conferences and symposium. You've taught and taken workshops. How is Pentaculum for you all different than those other things that people may be familiar with? How is Pentaculum a completely different experience? And what do participants, you feel like, take away that they don't take away from those other like experiences?
I think for me, I like the open-endedness of it. I think not having defined expectations was really important for me. There's no pressure. There's no need to perform per se, you know, and you can just go in and dive in to the studio. And that's one thing I really love about it. And that can be the thing that might be a little bit hard to explain to folks, because I think people are more accustomed to structure and clear defined objectives. And that's not necessarily the case with Pentaculum, but that's also what I love about it.
I think there's also an element of like camp to it also, which is far less, you know, structured than some of the other, you know, symposium or a conference or a residency. And just like Kim said, there's no there's no deliverables, there's no expectations on anything. And that freedom is just so nice. And it's also sort of puts you in sort of a vulnerable position. And I think when you're in that sort of position around other people who are equally as vulnerable, it can lead to some really like creative times and some really sort of some brainstorms that are really firing in a way that wouldn't necessarily otherwise have been facilitated in your studio at home. And I think it also like the sort of the play time of it, like it can be difficult to set aside play time in your own studio practice where you feel more of a need to be more productive and, you know, work towards commissions or, you know, other work that's going to get you money. But going down there, it's sort of nice, and it makes it a lot easier to just let yourself go of all of those expectations, not only that other people might have at you, but that you might have on yourself, and to really just be creative.
I agree with both of you, and you said it beautifully. For me too, I feel like you know, starting the new year, like the very first week of a new year in this creative environment, is really something. It's just like, you know, everybody's making their New Year resolution things, and you just get to go to this retreat, if you will, where there's no pressure. I love that you know, no expectation except just go and experience and be creative, feed off everyone's energy. And yeah, I think it's just a real gift to yourself, you know, especially after that holiday season. You know, now I'm going to go do me. And so I think that's really important.
Well, Nick, you brought it up, I think, earlier when you talked about your first experience, that I think another thing that makes Pentaculum pretty unique is that you're taking your creative practice outside of the studio, where potentially that could be a solitary creative practice, and into a group environment where you are, I think you said it was vulnerable. It is a very vulnerable situation where you are having people around you all the time, watching you work, watching your process as meticulous or messy as it may be. But I think it's that kind of new way of working in a sort of communal atmosphere that a lot of people end up really liking. So maybe you all have a particular memory or memorable experience of something that you made. I'd like to hear about what it was like working on your artwork in this communal environment, and maybe how that affected what you made while you were there.
Well, I made the first year that I was there, I for some reason got along really well with the writers. And I always try, whenever I go to places like this, any sort of craft school, I try to sort of branch out and get to know some people in other fields. And so I would just eat meals sometimes with the writers, and I really got along well with them, even though I'm a horrible writer. And one of them mentioned that he had a very short poem about tables. It was, you know, maybe 4 lines long, really, really short. And then one of the other ones was like, oh yeah, I've got a part of one of my poems or stories that's about a table. And it turned out all of them had like a different little section of a story or a poem that they could pull out that referenced tables or furniture, either directly or sort of philosophically or something. And so we came up with the idea of me making these 6 tables. I think there were 6 writers there. That were all fairly similar in size and structure, sort of these little pedestal tables. And then on the bottom of them, writing each person's own little segment of a poem or story that related to tables. And I made all of the tabletops, and I think each of them came over and wrote down their own little, you know, few words or sentences about tables on the bottom of it. And I think they're still in a box. I need to make the legs and put them on and finish building it. But that was sort of a very unexpected, you know, if you had told me when I got there that I would be building tables with writers, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. But that was a really fun project. Yeah.
For me, I don't necessarily have a specific item that stands out that I made while I was at Pentaculum, but I was able to utilize, you know, there are so many super smart and talented people at Pentaculum, people that have all these skills and materials that I'm less acquainted with or completely unfamiliar with. So one year I was making a basket form, and actually you're the one who helped me on that, Nick. Flaherty and and DeFord, is I was needing to dye my reed black. I don't know if you remember this, and I had bought some materials to buy to dye it while I was there, and it didn't work. And so you helped me out on that. And that's one thing I love about Pentaculum, is that you just have to ask. You just have to say, it's sort of like Nick is saying, is making yourself vulnerable. Like, hey, I keep screwing up on this. Can you help me with this? Do you know anything about this? And I was able to get exactly what I was hoping to achieve. And I love that about Pentaculum, and just this community and sharing and openness. It's just wonderful, and something that you can't ever achieve inside of your own studio.
Yeah. When I came to Pentaculum, I'm a full-time faculty member, and so I don't have too much opportunity to make my own work, except for, in between semesters. I had just finished a new series of work and shipped it off to a show. I didn't even get a chance to respond to it. So I came to Pentaculum with a goal of recreating some of those pieces so that I could understand them a little bit more. And what was good for me was to be around all my peers. As I mentioned, some of them are from a past life, from graduate school, from workshop experiences. And so to be able to make that work in that room with all those different makers was really special. And it really helped me understand what I was doing in my own work. But one thing that really stands out, since you asked, Nick, was the speed auction. Whatever that is called. That was a lot of fun, because I did bring a piece, and participated. I won a piece, and that was so much fun, that evening of sharing work.
Yeah. So because Pentaculum is what I kind of think of as an organic event, in that it changes not only over time, but every group of people that you bring in can create something out of it. And it began a few years ago. We had a fundraising auction for a participant who got into a car wreck on the way to Pentaculum. And so everybody sort of banded together to raise money for this participant by donating works to an auction. Or actually it's more like a raffle. It's a raffle where we sold raffle tickets, and then people could choose objects from the table. It was an incredible experience and a great way to give back to a participant. But everybody, as Jason mentioned, had so much fun with that. It's something that we've continued since then to raise scholarship monies for the following year for people to come to Pentaculum. And that is truly an event that was grown out of this moment, but is still one of the most favorite parts of the Pentaculum, because everybody's donating a piece. It could be a sketch, it could be a completed piece. The writers donate their books, and it seems like everybody gets to walk away with something from somebody else. And I was on a Zoom at the beginning of this year with some of the writers. Susie Banks-Baum, who's currently the coordinator for writers, held a virtual one-day Pentaculum for the writers. It was really wonderful when we got together and they wrote and talked about things. But they would all pull down from their shelves things that they were given or gifted, or things that they won from the raffle from that experience. So it's incredible how meaningful that is. And I want to stay on that vein of conversation for a second, because I think Nick brought it up and we bring it up. I think another thing that makes Pentaculum really unique is, and this isn't, ARROWMONT, when we have workshops, of course, we're typically having lots of different media, but I think about symposiums and conferences, which typically tend to be about one media. Even AAW brings together woodturners. But one of the things that Pentaculum does is it allows for people to meet creative artists outside of their discipline and work. And so Kim mentioned it as well. Do you all still stay in touch with maybe some people that you met at Pentaculum and other areas, and maybe talk about just the not just the making and creative side of it, but now that you've been to Pentaculum before, what are some of the personal relationships that you've built or are memorable from your experiences?
I stay in touch with people mostly through social media. I think that's the true for most of us. And Susie, I think, is one person who I tended to connect with, and it's mostly because she made herself available. You know, she would come through the studios and ask questions on a routine basis, and you build these wonderful relationships with people. Lindsay is another example from ceramics, you know, like being able, knowing she's in our region and being able to maybe work with her through other capacities. Like you meet these people and understand how smart and wonderful and talented and what they contribute to the field as a whole. So I know Nick, you and I have worked together with an organization, Tennessee Craft, and sort of getting those folks involved is for me, like I wouldn't have known Lindsay outside of Pentaculum probably. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I think I'm also similar to Kim. It's all mostly on social media that I stay in contact with people. And it's sort of just made my bench that much deeper almost. You know, if I ever did need to call on like some metal workers or some 2D artists for asking a question, I've got so many people that I've met at Pentaculum that I could you know, send them a message and think about. I also bump into people from like ceramicists and, you know, metals workers from like, you know, a few years ago, there was the American Craft Council had a symposium or conference here in Philadelphia, and I bumped into a number of people that I've met from at the Pentaculum were there. And I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? I just, you know, we went to camp together at ARROWMONT. Yeah, and then also I've got some other friends that aren't woodworkers also. Like I've got a really good friend who's a 2D. She does these charcoal drawings that are really amazing. And so I've been thinking, oh, I need to reach out to Ashton, the 2D coordinator, and like suggest her, oh, maybe she could come to the next Pentaculum if there's time. So it's all just so connected, you know, it's all just a big swirling pot of wonderful people.
I too keep track with people over social media as well. You know, and while I did meet so many others from the other studios, and it was great to socialize with them, you know, I mostly stayed in the wood shop. I mean, I did get out and move about, but I'm so happy that I knew most of the people in the wood shop, but I was so happy to meet Scarlett. Scarlett Rouse. She's such a special person. It was so much fun to meet her, and I'm just that shared experience, you know, in one space for 1 week. I think it's just you sort of it's a special thing that, you know, when you see that person on social media, when you're interacting, it's just a wonderful memory. Anyway, I only did one. I look forward. I can't wait to go back again. You know.
Well, I think that's, you know, it's kind of what we're talking about is this, it becomes this extended family or secret society or something that people, once they come, they know what that experience is like. And it only grows over time and will continue to grow. Like I mentioned, our plan at ARROWMONT is currently we have plans of doing 2. We have done 2 in the past. Of course, the pandemic sort of messed that up, but we had the sort of winter and spring one. Our goals is to have as many as 4 a year and maybe even more, as much as we can fit into our schedule. So as coordinators yourself, my sort of final question for you all is, as coordinators, you of course get to curate, sort of design the week, both through the people that you invite, but also just monitoring how things are going in the studios, seeing those little pop-up events that maybe need to happen or should happen, or connecting people across campus. I'm always interested and I'm always looking forward to how Pentaculum will continue to evolve and change. This type of event, and this is a question that you can speak broadly on, you don't have to be specific, but this particular type of event, what do you think the future of this event holds? And how do you think that events like this can happen other places and in other ways? Do you think about how Pentaculum could be something that, for me as a program director, I'm thinking it's almost a new model of what places like craft schools can provide. What do you all think the future of Pentaculum should be and could be?
That's a toughie. Yeah, I'm fortunate, well, actually, I think all of us here, all three, Nick, Jason, and I have been involved in collaborative events that happen outside of an organized institution, like Emma Lake, for example, and Echo Lake, which I guess happens up Bucks County, but it's just kind of like a side program that happens at the school because of the facility. So I think there could be opportunities to maybe partner with some of those organizations or some of those other events. It could be interesting to have conversation across these collaborative events. I think that would be really fun. For me as a coordinator, what I always strove to do was to bring in people that have never experienced ARROWMONT and come from diverse practices, like people who maybe work more sculpturally, or those who work more functionally, people who've never been to ARROWMONT, who might never come to ARROWMONT if I don't invite them to Pentaculum. And that sort of grows the experience and also grows the visibility of ARROWMONT. One other thing that I think would be a lot of fun is roller skates.
Yes.
I think like you mentioned, just more of them would be a great thing. I've thought about like, what if it was longer, or what if it had this element to it? And I'm sort of reluctant to want to change it in that way. I think that the 1 week is perfect. It's nice and it's very manageable for 1 week to get away. And it's very condensed, and sort of that energy is all just packed in there, and then as far, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to like really try to change things or try to institute more guidelines or rules or anything like that. I know you mentioned for some of those other pentaculums of the other, if you were to do 4 a year, maybe some of those other ones could be like high school students or something like that, like having other like local students that aren't professional crafts people be coming in there and doing that. And maybe some sort of like, bridging those two worlds, like having professionals and younger, I don't know, just something to expand it into that universe. But yeah, I think just more of them would be wonderful.
Yeah, I also thought maybe a little longer would be nice, but then like Nick just said, maybe it's perfect where it's at. If it was longer, maybe it fits into everyone's schedule nicely, and also that amount of time makes you kind of focus your energies and not be all over the place. I do agree with Kim that a collaborative effort would be really nice. I'm not sure, it might change the experience for some, because collaboration is sometimes a scary word. But having experienced Echo Lake, I think it would be a great thing to do, where there's a bunch of materials. Maybe that's maybe in more cross-disciplinary efforts, through these collaborative things, whether that be through technique or materials or whatever that is.
I'm just stealing everybody's ideas. I'm just sort of taking notes. This is all a trick. This is a question, but everything what people have said have been great. I've thought about something similar, Jason, where I wonder if there's a point down the road where we have thematic pentaculums, people who work with nature as a topic, for example, so that people can have, or the figure, for example, or whatever it is, and have people begin to connect outside of their disciplines with people who have similar interests. And Nick, your suggestion of, I think one of the things I've always admired by watching coordinators invite people is, of course, trying to sort of invite people with diverse backgrounds and diverse art experiences, from people who have formal art training to some who are just starting, to grad students, to professionals in the field. So I think the idea of high school and young adults being, this could be a catalyst for them to enter into the art world is phenomenal. So totally stealing that, Nick. Do you all have any questions for each other? I mean, I feel like that sort of been doing the typical panel I ask you, but do you all have any curious questions for one another before we wrap things up?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that I feel like Kim probably was the perfect person to start off the coordinator position in wood. Having a foot in the wood turning world and also in the furniture making. So Kim, thank you for inviting me to my first Pentaculum and for putting together such a wonderful group of people. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I
Kim,
think both of you guys, I'm fairly strategic in the selection process, and I think that both of you have that same experience and practice in both wood turning and woodworking. And that was part of why I made the recommendations, is because you do have knowledge of the broader community and you can bring them in. But thank
I'm
you.
just really excited to get back into it. This conversation just has me just like itching. I know there was talk briefly of us doing a spring Pentaculum this year when we were talking about it over the winter, sort of when the pandemic was starting to go away, but there still would have been all these different guidelines and restrictions placed on interacting with other people. And we all very quickly decided that just wouldn't be what the Pentaculum is, like not being able to really closely interact with other people and just have the freedom to walk around and really get to know people. It just would have been missing something. So we decided not to do that. And that was the right choice. But, I think it's got me looking forward to 2022 spring that much more.
Yeah.
right. My only problem is I wish the studio could offer more spaces so I can have even more people. I'm already, as I put together my list of who wants to come, who would work well together, I'm like, ooh, I want a few more spaces to pack this in.
One thing I would like to see grow for Pentaculum are the resources to support individuals coming, because I know for me, is always strategizing, okay, if this person's part of an academic program, they might be able to get support from their school to help bring them there. This person doesn't, they're not involved in an academic program, so I want to make these funds available to them. It'd be really wonderful if more funds could be provided to the program, because that's a huge factor in growing participation and the type of participant at Pentaculum. And I think we all agree that as much different perspectives and voices that are brought to the table just makes for a richer experience for everybody.
Well, it's a really good segue, Kim, because as Jason knows, as I've been in contact, but actually recently ARROWMONT received a pretty major grant that some of it was money for Pentaculum, specifically being able to have a more diverse group. And so we actually got money for scholarships that are specifically for underrepresented voices in in Central Appalachia. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Appalachia. And LGBTQ persons in Appalachia as well. So we're along the same lines, thinking that way. Like, we want to get to a point where scholarships and financial aid is available for people to come to this event, because it has been so successful based on the things that you all have done with it already. We just can't wait to grow it even more. And so we're looking forward to that. And so if there are even maybe more funders out there listening to this, be in touch with us and let us know. I do want to make a point to say, for those of you who are listening to this panel or watching it, I think that if you want to know more about Pentaculum, you can easily sort of Google Pentaculum and ARROWMONT, and you'll get a bunch of stuff that comes up that talks more about it. Specifically, we mentioned her several times, but Susie Banks-Baum has been coming to Pentaculum for many years as the assistant to the writers group with Katie Schultz. And she's taking over as the coordinator starting in 2022. And every year that she comes, she writes a blog post about the week. So if you search for Pentaculum blog, ARROWMONT, you will see her blog post come up at the ARROWMONT blog. But I think even maybe it was last year, or maybe it was the year before that, our metals coordinator, Aaron, made a video that's on YouTube as well and interviews some people. So you can even go to YouTube and Google Pentaculum as well as search all the hashtags Pentaculum or Pentaculum in a specific year, Pentaculum 2017, 18. When Jason and I chose the word Pentaculum, it was sort of ideologically because it was that 5 sides, but it was also because it was a very unique word that we wanted to sort of grab onto, a word that people didn't use very often, and so that we could kind of brand it to ARROWMONT. And I think that's worked really well. but it's always funny to me when you search the hashtag Pentaculum, you still get like goth jewelry, like pentagram jewelry and stuff that comes up. So people might be searching that hashtag and be like, well, this is what I expected Pentaculum to be like. But again, Pentaculum is a word for any 5-sided object, so be prepared for that as well. So I want to thank any final words from you all before we wrap up.
I just want to say thanks to you and Jason for conceiving of Pentaculum and the follow through to make it happen, because it's really just this wonderful experience and I'm really grateful for it. So thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of work that goes into putting it all together, and it's very much appreciated by all of us.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, thank you all, especially for taking the time to have this conversation. And for anybody out there listening, if you have any questions about Pentaculum, if you're interested more about it, you can find my email address on the ARROWMONT's website. It's indeford@arrowmont.org. Reach out to me. Happy to answer questions. And for anybody interested in this amazing event. So thank you to our panelists and coordinators. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.